these Hong Kong people are, quote, willing to die. These are young kids who are really fighting against what they believe is Communist China's encroachment. Hello, my name is Annie Wu. I am the China editor for the Epoch Times. I've been working at the publication for 5 years now. In this week's national edition, the front page story is something that my team wrote and reported on. Beijing has recently stepped up its criticisms of the Hong Kong protesters. Beijing officials said that this is currently a life or death situation. They are currently labeling the protesters as rioters who are violent. These Hong Kong people are rising up against authoritarianism. They feel that this extradition bill, this is what they're protesting about, is basically encroaching on their freedoms, and they feel this is further diminishing the city's autonomy from mainland China. This was supposed to be guaranteed when the territory, which was a British colony for about 100 years, was transferred to mainland China in 1997. The two sides agreed to allow Hong Kong to preserve its autonomy, its freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, independent judiciary. These are all things that are not available in mainland China. So as this extradition bill, which proposes that any country, including mainland China, can seek extradition of criminal suspects, Hong Kong people became very concerned because they know that in China, where there is no rule of law, people can be randomly snatched from the streets without any pressed charges, and they can be tortured in jail and not given a fair trial. So they feel that they must stand up to this bill and tell the government to fully withdraw it. And this is why they're on the streets every weekend. And recently, Beijing strongly criticized these Hong Kong protests. They're trying to contain them by saying that they're violent, saying that they're endangering China's sovereignty. They've basically threatening and showing muscle to discourage these protesters from coming out. And the U.S. has kind of raised their voices of concern that Beijing is using this kind of rhetoric. So this past week, Senator Tom Cotton and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi both made statements. Gordon Chang, who is a China expert that we were able to interview, said that although China may be careful not to use such force, it is still a question in the air that could happen. And it would be a very dangerous situation for Beijing because these Hong Kong people are, quote, willing to die. These are young kids who are really fighting against what they believe is Communist China's encroachment onto their affairs. They've seen in the past years since the territory was handed back to Chinese rule that Beijing is now interfering with how their textbooks teach education, how their elections are carried out, and they also see that freedom of speech is being limited. People are afraid to criticize Beijing, so they feel these are all the rising force of communism slowly taking place in their city, and they're afraid that their city will become just another mainland Chinese city. So this is why they're out on the streets every day, facing the tear gas, facing the rubber bullets that the police are using to disperse them. In Hong Kong, the Epoch Times has a local bureau that creates Chinese language news reports, and they're at the scene of every protest, whether it goes late into the early hours of dawn, whether police are shooting tear gas everywhere, they're still there, pretty much covering it day and night. So the Epoch Times was first created in the Chinese language in order to provide uncensored information about China to the greater wide world. We had our journalists in China telling us information about human rights abuses, including of this spiritual practice called Falun Dafa, also known as Falun Gong. The Epoch Times felt that we really needed to get this information out to the world about these human rights abuses in order for the international community to know that China, this great power, is doing this to its own citizens. To me, truth and tradition not only means holding myself to the highest journalistic standards in our truthful reporting, but also in terms of everyday life. Tradition means looking to history, looking to the past for inspiration. Actually, I was a East Asian Studies major in college, and I studied lots of different ancient Chinese texts that taught me about the different Confucian, Buddhist, and Taoist spiritual beliefs that informed Chinese culture for thousands of years. And this really gave me inspiration to lead my life in a more pure and stress-free way. And I think the Epoch Times, in their lifestyle section, I also feel the same way. Definitely take inspiration from traditional culture and see how we can apply it to our everyday lives.